So there's a scene in this movie that comes in like the end of the second act, I guess, and it's this babysitter and this boy go into what's, I guess, an abandoned like boathouse or something that's on the beach, and they walk in and it's full of like old wheelchairs and like weird trash and newspapers spread everywhere. And you just get this vibe of like this kind of musty old place. All that stuff in there was found in there. Like the art department didn't go in there and like make all that stuff up. It's just one of those things that you find as a kid and explore, and it's just dirty. And that's this movie in every regard. And that's maybe the best compliment I can give an exploitation film.
I think one of the titles of this movie is "Nightmare of a
Damaged Brain," which is my favorite title.
I like that one.
Yeah.
And so you've got this guy with a damaged brain, and he's got this, underlying trauma that's not being addressed by this experimental drug, but it's being made worse. And it's funny. The movie starts with the CIA guy looking at his rap sheet on 6 monitors, to make it really technologically,
which was high
80s
technology
cool.
back then too.
Yeah, because you need to see.
You got 6.
You need to see 4 copies of his mugshot.
Yeah,
and then the rap sheet or his diagnosis.
Hold me, pull it up for you. Here, I got 6 screens.
But what's great is his diagnosis. It was just a really funny diagnosis because it's just listing of like symptoms and his disease and stuff. But his mental illness is like schizophrenia. It's great because these could be like chapter titles of the movie, kind of. So like schizophrenia, mild amnesia. I don't know why they put mild in there. What else? He's got dream fascination.
He definitely has that.
Yeah.
I wrote them all down, but all these little elements are. He has seizures, epilepsy.
We see all that.
Yeah, but really, his epilepsy and his seizures are kind of more like symptomatic of when his trauma comes to the surface.
Yeah,
when his trauma is awoken.
You definitely have a lot of sympathy for him in the beginning,
Right.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that he's, well, I don't know if you know this because my thoughts might have been poisoned before I watched the movie, but like knowing that he's under this experimental drug, I think they say that at the beginning with his treatment. Anyway, he doesn't go to this doctor's appointment he's supposed to at the beginning of the film. He's on a ferry. And you're just like, well, where's he going? Because he was let out of this place, but he was supposed to be like under kind of from afar, surveillance.
Right. Yeah.
But we come to find out he has a scary past, and his trauma is age old.
Yeah.
And it was a long time ago. So this is this interesting character that's the basis of the film.
Yeah, I mean, it starts out with a real punch in the face because this nightmare sequence that the film starts out with him in a bed and the gore around him is one of the coolest horror sequences, one of my favorites.
Great way to kick off the movie. Too.
Yeah, the eyes opening on the decapitated head and all of that.
It's like the horror version of the Godfather scene.
Really and truly, yeah.
And
another scene that was added as a pickup shot, but a really, really cool, powerful scene. And then there are other places in that movie where we get that head again, kind of like opening its eyes in a little subliminal shots, which I love that.
Yeah. That's like my favorite part.
And then, of course, where is he going on the ferry and everything? I mean, he's going to 42nd Street for one thing, which really ends up being a really awesome scene. Him walking down 42nd Street. They're
just
obviously
a time capsule.
Yeah, they're obviously filming out of a car. You're really seeing the real 42nd
They're not shutting
Street.
it down.
Oh, no.
It's just real footage.
No,
it's just an
yeah.
actor walking through it.
They go into that porn palace.
Yeah.
Uh,
that whole
yeah.
thing felt very like Taxi Driver, like 70s, like Warriors,
Oh,
like
yeah.
that
Definitely.
that whole vibe.
Yeah, you'll never
yeah.
you'll never be able to make that again. I
No.
mean, it's just
No.
They got close with James Franco's show, where he plays twins.
But there's nothing like those scenes where someone is basically illegally getting shots, and you're seeing like real people in their real state of being, like doing something decades ago.
Probably
Some
a
of them,
lot of people who don't want to be filmed.
well, you see a
either.
couple of people catch a look at the camera, wondering what the fuck is going on, and
There's a great sequence. It's not real, but there's a great sequence that's fictionalized in Polyester, John Waters' Polyester, where he's got a news crew at the porn theater and he's trying to get an interview of all these guys coming out of the screening. He's like, "Will you tell me about this film? Will you tell me?" And they're all just like, "Whoa, no!" You know? And it's kind of like in this. It's like nobody wants to be filmed
That's
out
a
on
good
42nd Street.
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, they have their privacy for a little bit, because it's like when he's in this porn palace, you get to take a look at something that most of us never get to see. These private booths that he goes into one of them and is sort of looking at the dancers through the door, the little trap door thing, which obviously, I know they closed that place down for a couple of hours just so they could get those shots. But it just looks so raw, like so real.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure
you know
there's-
that they were mopping up semen like before and after he was in there.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
They didn't show.
I
I
would-
was gonna say they're probably still in work hours. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so, you can shoot, but we're still
Yeah.
gonna have people jerking off next to you. Sorry.
And talk about bringing back the character and him being dropped into this world. It's not something he's unfamiliar with, but now that he's a victim of this experimental drug that seems to be bringing his trauma to the surface much faster than it probably, we don't know because we haven't, the movie starts there. He is immediately decides to go to a peep show to get his rocks off, not knowing what it'll do to him, and it immediately wrecks him. He has an epileptic seizure,
Yeah.
and I think he goes to two different spots. He starts to have little hallucinations and little callback memories to this trauma. And then whenever the masturbation scene happens with the woman masturbating on the other side of the window, he just goes into a full-on foam at the mouth epileptic seizure that, something that would be, we associate epilepsy with like flashing lights and stuff, but they didn't even like David Lynch this thing with flashing lights. It's not even necessary. Like just seeing a female naked is now surfacing his trauma and reawakening the demon inside.
Yeah, and
he can't
his
handle it.
performance
It's
in
incredible.
those,
Very,
he is
very good.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Baird Stafford, I believe is
Yes.
how you say his name, who actually passed away just a couple of months ago.
Oh wow.
I
Rest
know
in peace.
that.
But he was fantastic, and he's got everything going to play this character, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Real minimal dialogue.
Yeah.
So you don't know what he's thinking. There's no internal dialogue, so you really don't know what he's thinking
Right.
other than these flashes
Right.
and hallucinations.
I'm
so
glad
it's really
they didn't do any voice. I'm so glad they didn't do any voice.
a lesser movie would have just been like, oh,
Yeah.
and then like I wanted to see her naked or
Right.
whatever. It would have been extra creepy, like Maniac or something.
Yeah.
But Maniac's great in its own right. But this
but
is like
this is
different.
super dark, atmospheric,
Yeah.
and
You
a
get it all.
vibe.
You get it all from his face and his eyes.
People talk about Maniac and some other films as having like a documentary feel and having that real New York grittiness and everything, and it does. But I don't know. There's something about Nightmare that just feels a lot more dangerous, a lot more like you're seeing something you shouldn't be seeing.
It's that thing that society likes to put a lid on. Is like we don't like mental illness.
Yeah.
Like cops just straight up shoot mental illness on a daily basis.
Sure.
We just don't understand it. There's not enough education, and we all just shun it.
Yeah.
And we like to put it in this institution and not look at it
Yeah.
and let the doctors deal with it. And so like this movie like pulls a character out of that world and forces you to look at him for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And puts him in dangerous situations that he finds himself in and
Yeah.
he's doing to himself, but he can't help it. He is actually, it reminds me of this other film, Possum, which we reviewed, in that he's sort of trying to deal with his thing without knowing how to do it, having the resources or the education. He's trying to go to his source of trauma and deal with it and confront it the only way he knows how. And because he sees no road almost ahead of him.
Right.
Like he's just like, this is me projecting, but it kind of feels like he has to go back in order to go forward.
Yeah.
And so like he gets all these little stumbling blocks and roadblocks along the way that kind of like divert him and turn him into a killer. But he's trying to fix himself and without any tool set, without anything.
They don't like make him like a sociopath right off the bat. Like they like some soulless person who's just willing to kill. It's like a very like
it's empathetic. You
Yeah,
feel
it
really
bad.
is.
At the
for
very
the guy.
beginning, you definitely
Yeah.
feel sorry for
You
him.
do.
It's not until he starts murdering people and you're like,
I still felt sorry for the guy
A little
all
bit.
the way through. I feel
okay,
like
so this is interesting. I don't know. You might have to cut this out, which is fine. But I had a conversation with somebody recently about serial killers, stuff like that, and how like some of the stories, most of serial killers anyway, have very sad stories. But for me personally, it's only so far you can go because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of people out there that have horrible, horrible lives that don't wind up massacring people.
it's the same old shit. They
what I was
just
gonna
want to
say
be loved.
Is
and
somebody
all that
brought
stuff.
up what's her face, Eileen Wuornos or whatever, and I was like, yes, she had a horrible, horrible life. The first person she ever killed was in self-defense. So it's like I don't fault her at all for that. But then it's like once she did it, it made her feel good, and then it goes to this slippery slope.
It's a bad association.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you can excuse the first one, I guess, but then it's like, okay, but then she killed 7 other people. So
yeah,
it's like,
I think the sexual repression angle on this has a lot to do with George because there is one kill that seems very orgasmic. And that is the kill of the woman that he follows home from the bar, where
who has black hair like the person his father has sex with in his trauma.
Yeah.
Yes, who, by the way, is listed as mother in the script, as his mother, but everyone on set thought it was a hooker, and I still think it's a hooker.
That's what I thought.
But
too.
again, there were a lot.
They're at a nightclub, like a bar essentially.
Well, I'm thinking about the girl who gets decapitated on the father. That's what I think. But yeah, the woman that he follows home from the nightclub, which is a real nightclub in Florida. Everything about that place, there's like pictures of like, Humphrey Bogart on the wall, but then there's like a honky tonk singer and all this other stuff going on. But anyways, he follows her, but that kill seems very orgasmic, like he's getting a release, and he's stabbing her in the stomach and slowly push. We have that slow-mo shot. Another thing that's really impressive about his performance is that, at least according to him, he says that he never did a second take on a single shot in this film, that the director refused to do second takes with him. He said that he would ask for it and he wouldn't get it. So essentially, everything we're seeing, according to him, was a first take.
Wow.
For him. So if that's true or even half true, it's amazing.
That's even more,
for him to go that far in a lot of those shots.
That's even more telling of his performance.
Yeah, but in that kill, you get that vibe that he's getting that release that he somehow needs, from this trauma. Mm-hmm. But that can never maybe really thirst that can't be quenched really or something.
So let's talk about what makes this a qualifier for killer kids. And it's really just my opinion. But
it's just like 2 lawyers battling out, and Kris Fogg will be like, yes or no?
Yeah, well, let's have this conversation, because basically we couldn't do this as a first fright because it's not the director's first horror movie.
Ah, okay.
And it's not a sequel, so Revenge of the Sequels is out. So first fright's like, how do we shoehorn this into a Killer Kids? How do we shoehorn this into a Killer Kids movie? And the way I see it is, this movie is like Big, the movie Big.
For Josh Baskin, life was a little unfair.
I told you to take out the garbage. Mr. Bus. I'm going to tell you again, Josh. Baskin. Josh!
Until he made a little wish.
I wish I were big.
Sweetheart, it's 7:30. Are you up? Josh!
20th Century Fox presents Tom Hanks. Big.
I turned into a grown-up, Mom. I made this wish on a machine, and it turned me into a grown-up.
And the way I see the main character is, he is a child inside that adult body. And he is still with his trauma the whole movie. He might know how to drive.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know how to fix a car because when that car just pulls over, the car's dead. It's dead forever. So he has no like adult knowledge. He doesn't really fornicate. He just is seen watching moments of fornication.
Yeah, he's more curious.
He's more curious
Yeah.
like a kid. He has had his life stolen from him, just like in Big. He fast forwards to being in an adult body.
I just gotta
This movie-
I gotta
This is the
pause
first
you.
time
I gotta
this
pause you
movie's-
just for a second.
Yeah.
This is a bigger stretch than I kind of expected.
Dude, well, let me
From
get
your
there.
answer,
Let me get there.
because every Friday the 13th film is a killer kid movie.
Sure.
If this is the way we're
Sure. So
we're going.
Hold on.
that's what I said. I started off by saying this is my opinion.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
This is my opinion, and let me lay out a few examples.
Okay.
Big being one of them. I think this dude is a child has a child's brain.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that counts as one child in a child-killing movie.
All right, so you're
the
about-
second
Yeah.
main aspect, which we haven't said a word about, is my boy CJ.
Yeah,
CJ
yeah.
fucking kicks raw ass
Yeah.
in this movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And he is a motherfucking cold-blooded killer.
He
The
is.
dude shoots 8 times, and every single bullet
He's good,
hits.
man. He's good.
Nanny, nanny, boo, boo, stick your head in doo doo.
No, that kid
He
is
was
a
born for
killer.
this.
You're right.
He was born for this.
You're right. That's a good point. I will say this. Just on top of that, speaking of CJ, that little fucker. God damn it, dude! When that scene, I had to laugh. It was so funny when the babysitter sees our protagonist, not protagonist, antagonist, really, with the mask on. And he's like a 6 foot tall, and she's like, CJ, put that mask
well,
on. And
CJ
it's like,
had
really?
figured out the torso.
Well, it's
before
because
that.
he has the
He
torso.
had
He has that.
Yeah,
he has
I
that-
know. I mean,
It's dark. It's
yeah.
supposed to be dark. But it's fully lit
It fills it
living
up.
room,
I
but
mean,
yeah.
I could fall. Like, he
That is a stretch.
it's
I'll
the-
get-
Let
I'll
me
give you that.
backtrack real quick,
Okay.
though. First of all, this is the first time I think Nightmare and Big have ever been in the same sentence
Yeah.
together, which
So-
is amazing.
So there's another weird movie besides Big. I think I compared it to Possum earlier.
I definitely feel that for
Yeah,
sure.
the atmosphere and trying to go back to your trauma to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah.
Because the drugs aren't working, they're
Yeah.
making things worse. There's one other film. I'm gonna have to look at my notes,
Oh,
but
go for it.
it's a main influence. I think.
I mean, I will
Or,
say this, because it's not the director's first film, I can see why you want to put it in the Killer Kids category, because this movie should be talked about regardless, right? So
Right.
it's like, I'm glad we're talking about it. So that's the good news. But, like, it's hard. To me, it's still a stretch to call it a Killer Kids movie, only because we've been so on point with actual kids committing murder in the last few movies. But I will give
and
you
of
this.
course, there are more in line that should
Totally.
be talked about.
Totally.
Well,
and I
this
will
one
say this,
jumps the line.
And there's definitely movies in the future that we'll have on the Killer Kids that actually kids don't commit the murder; they just do violent things,
Sure,
or they
yeah.
get close to. said
Well, I
murder.
think
So-
Travis. I'm sure you have more points coming.
Oh, yeah.
And some of those might be that we do have actual killer kids in this movie
Yeah.
times 2.
Yeah.
Yes, more
yes.
than a lot of
That
quote
could-
unquote Killer Kids movies.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah. And actually, in the original screenplay, CJ is really the star of the movie.
Yeah.
And it really kind of follows him and everything he's doing in that home, and the hijinks with him playing jokes, and then of course at the end, kind of like defending the house.
Real quick,
Yeah.
now we're on the subject of CJ, because that scene, because I thought it was kind of funny, but when he fakes the throat slit, which I love, that's so fucking badass and disturbing. I did like the comparison though, because maybe there wasn't, maybe it's not intentional, but like before that, we see his mom and her boyfriend like getting ready, to have sex,
Yeah.
and then they get the call being like, "Oh my God, there's blood everywhere," and they run off. First of all, CJ, biggest cockblock in the world.
It's
I
a
would've-
classic too, like Boy
Yeah.
Who Cries Wolf story.
But I love that
Yeah.
scene in contrast with the very beginning where
Yeah.
they're in the act and
Yeah.
the boy catches. And there's something there. Maybe
Yes.
it's a little stretch.
It's not a
but
one-to-one, but yeah, there
Yeah.
is like
I'm
you
glad
know,
they put the scene in there. Is what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
It's not just because hey, let's show a little bit of sensuality. You know, I think there's a purpose there.
I think CJ's a really interesting character. I love almost every single character in this movie for the performances, but also they feel so real.
They do.
Yeah.
Every single character
really do.
feels like the mom, feels like the boyfriend, feels like the babysitter.
It's such an
feels like the
authentic,
kids.
raw feeling film, which makes everything that happened like hit you so much harder. All these kids in the film, because there are multiple children in this film, were all out of a community theater in
Wow.
Florida. No acting experience, at least for the ones that are in the Florida shoot.
I was gonna say, which is so funny to me because, and I mean this with all the love, and all I think about this movie, and I think about what it would have happened if it would have just been a typical slasher movie, in the sense that, you know, you're gonna get stale acting, really bad effects, you know. But this movie, like you said, like every character plays their role well, and the fact that a lot of them weren't actors is even more mind-boggling.
And that there might not have been second takes on a lot of this stuff.
Which,
Because
I mean-
apparently this director would do one take and just move on.
And
That's
you can tell
amazing.
it kind of, something like the traumatizing of CJ when he's shown the body of his friend,
yeah.
and the dude probably who is the real coroner in real life.
They were.
Yeah, he's just hardcore. He's like, you knew this boy, didn't you? You knew this boy, didn't you?
Well, that boy-
Answer me right
Yeah.
now. We need to solve this crime.
Well, see,
And the kid's just like being traumatized,
Yeah.
and the camera's just a oneer, just like following, and the mom's dead silent, like
Yeah.
bitch mom. And then she's like, get the car, and she's like such a bitch.
yeah, it's so real. It's so.
she's like
yeah.
just like trauma rama on that.
Yeah, this
kid.
kid's really getting it. And the
Trauma-rama.
Yeah.
actor who plays CJ, his father was a sheriff. And so they were able to
Wow.
get a lot of these emergency people, I think, through that.
amazing.
So that might even have been, I don't know this for sure, a friend of his dad.
Sure.
Or I don't think it would have been his dad, but it may have been somebody that he felt comfortable being talked to that way.
Yeah.
But he plays really good, and in his performance, and just him in general, his character, makes me wish for a sort of Wolfman versus Frankenstein movie series where I could get CJ versus the kids in Bloody Birthday, or something along those
Monster
lines.
Squad.
Because I would
Yeah.
love to see CJ versus that other turd in
He's
Bloody
fucking
Birthday.
good with a gun.
Yeah,
You give him a
yeah,
gun,
real
Oh.
good. That other kid's not that great with a gun.
No. They
So,
just have a duel.
One
That's what I
point.
mean. This kid
1
is
point for
confident.
CJ. Yeah.
And it just happens to be against the grain for most killer movies in that the killer isn't killing for personal gain, it's self-defense.
Yeah.
But I still think he's a fucking...
He's enjoying it.
He's cold-blooded when he
Dude,
shoots that thing.
this is what he's been wanting
It's
the whole
incredible.
time. Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, right between the eyes.
Yeah. Right between the
He's like,
eyes.
over. I'm shooting through a fucking door and
Yeah.
nailing him and
Yeah.
nailing him.
And you get
getting
the-
a shotgun,
He
fucking
doesn't
nailing
miss.
him, nailing him.
And you know,
He
Yeah,
doesn't miss.
8 out of 8 shots.
and those,
In a revolver, by the way.
A revolver.
Which
dude, yeah.
Hard to pull the trigger. That would make any
Well,
kid just go
it's-
pow.
it's
Not
hard
much
to get
kickback.
It's hard to get 8 shots out of a revolver too.
Oh yeah,
last
6
I
shots.
checked.
Wow.
But they
CJ
didn't
can.
lose count, to give him credit.
yeah.
They shot 6 and then he had to go get another weapon.
Well,
The kid was smart and like got
Yeah.
himself out of those grinds that he was in.
Well, and
Yeah,
those
yeah.
those scenes in the house in Florida, which I mean, this house is it's just like blood on the shag carpet kind of vibe.
Totally.
These scenes where George is kind of lurking up the stairs in this mask that was a Don Post mask. I love this mask.
It looks like the Who Framed Harry Crumb when he's like covered in like goop and he puts on a fucking beard.
Yeah.
He's trying to play like
It's
someone
a-
from Saudi Arabia.
yeah, hey, it's a
so bad.
it's a creepy mask because Don Post made a mask. This sculpt was a pirate. It was also a sheik. And it was also a character called Mr. Cool, which was kind of maybe like a pimp character. And when you look at the Don Post catalog, you see that same face multiple times with the beard slightly
Love it.
adjusted.
Is
But
it the same pimp from Demons? Is that what the mask is of?
Possibly.
yeah, but the FX artist, his name is Cleve Hall, who did all of the work in Florida, but yet was placed as special effects makeup assistant in the credits, which was really strange, under Ed French, who only did the pickup shots, which we'll get into that later.
Yeah, but Ed French, who's had like a very fruitful career, still working to this day.
Definitely.
Just did the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
No, yeah, Ed French. And Ed French, actually, we'll get into it, but he hated this kind of effects. And I think always wanted to get into that sort of Star Trek
T2
kind of creature stuff.
I didn't realize he did some of the effects on the Dungeons and Dragon movie because there is a lot of practical stuff in there, which is amazing to see in a blockbuster.
Yeah, but this guy Cleve Hall did all the stuff for the Florida production, which again was believed to be the movie in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Before the editors got a hold of it and the producers and really started reworking this film into what we see. It's quite a difference.
And it was Ed French's first credit.
Yeah, it's his.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's his first.
At least on IMDb.
Yeah,
there might be another one,
but yeah, those scenes inside the house where George is lurking around, coming up the stairs with that claw hammer, which is a really creepy murder device. He's got the clear plastic gloves on, which is also just a really creepy vibe. Yeah. You get the feeling that it's like his younger self against him with this kid, even though the surprise ending is also something that not only wasn't in the script.
That was awesome.
Wasn't in the script, but was a extra shot because can we talk about that a little bit? So there's a scene in the film where the mother character is talking to the boyfriend and says, well, his father sends me checks monthly, so that's all I see of him. That's because that plot point of him being the father is nowhere anywhere in the concept.
Yes.
When they were shooting that finale, after they shot the original ending, which doesn't have that sequence where she's saying, that's my husband, they just kind of did this on a whim. Apparently, maybe one of the producers was like, I think we should throw this in.
It's like a fucking movie-sized monkey wrench in the whole thing. Well, we had a lot to talk about after this movie ended, and now we have a whole other fucking pile of worms that we gotta undo.
It's a great
because now CJ's like the fucking like sins of the father. Like, are coming through in CJ, and like he winks at the camera.
I love that.
Wink at the camera.
You know, apparently they filmed CJ committing suicide.
Jesus.
Like CJ had a staged, like it was like gonna look like a prank to his friends. And he ends up really killing himself. As like a result of all his dealing with all these new traumas that are happening to him.
Dude.
Which I would have totally bought if they did it in the movie, because he is subjected to a lot of shit. And then he has to fucking blow that guy away and then kills himself. Like, that would have been a crazy dark ending, but that would have been cool.
And they filmed a lot of stuff that he was subjected to that I wish would have made it in the film. There's one scene where he and his family go to the beach. And he's kind of wandering around by himself. And in the movie, you see him kind of run back and try to tell his mom and his boyfriend something. And they're like, oh, CJ, just go away. Like, you didn't see anything. And we have that scene where he kind of sees George kind of standing there in the wind.
Anytime anybody's in a trench coat on the beach, that is a red flag for everyone.
There was an even bigger red flag that they filmed, which is George covered up to here in the sand wearing a clown mask, coming out of the sand and grabbing CJ.
Blood Beach style.
And then CJ, and in the script, CJ runs, tells the mother, and they tell him to shut up and go away. But they filmed that scene. And
good mom.
So bizarre.
I would love to see that, you know. Another scene that they did film but didn't work out quite the way they wanted was the character that he follows from the bar and kills in her home. There's that kind of scene where it's kind of a dark scene, hard to see, but he kind of pulls up into a sandy area and lays her down and then kind of screams up in the air. And it's kind of lengthy. It's like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or something. I don't know. But that was filmed in front of the space launch area there. And Apollo was about to lift off.
Hell yeah.
What?
And they had planned for the... I don't know why.
The producers knew how to capitalize on stuff.
They had planned for the launch to be happening while he was laying her down. And it wasn't happening when they were filming it because the launch was actually canceled at that moment because of a mechanical issue. So that scream from George is him just trying to make something out of nothing in that scene. But again, another one of those weird, interesting ideas that they had that we'll never really see. But
Wow.
But
speaking of capitalizing on something that's like fallen in your lap as a producer, so like the movie like was seen, like it had like 117 or something screens in New York, and in Florida had like another 80 or something. This movie was exhibited. And I think it got butts in the seat because they marketed it thanks to a white lie. Tom Savini was somehow associated. And so in the marketing, it said, from the makers of Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
That's how they got.
yeah.
And so they knew that, Tom Savini was coming up fast, and they could leverage what little involvement he had in the film.
Right.
Which was minimal at best.
Well, let's talk about
you know-
that, because that's an
Yeah.
interesting
From
point.
what I know.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, yeah. I mean,
Because
and,
according to the
Yeah.
main actor and the director, Savini was there almost the entire time.
well, this is what Ed French says.
Yeah.
Because, again, Ed French doesn't come into this production until after they've wrapped in Florida, apparently.
Yeah.
And they've decided to get these pickup shots of the nightmare sequence where he wakes up and there's a decapitated head, and the decapitation of the lady who is mounted onto the father, that
Right.
crazy decapitation sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bring Ed French in that, maybe out of the recommendation of Savini, but Ed French was just getting started and was probably nervous about pulling the effects off, understandably. So Savini comes on board as what Ed French calls a technical advisor. And he is on set, at least for certain, on the decapitation sequence, because there are behind-the-scenes photos of Savini on set with the axe in his hands, probably going through the motions, talking
Yeah.
about how it's all going to go down. And that scene, like, I guess to Ed French's credit, is, even though Ed French doesn't believe this, but it actually is a very effective scene,
Super
I think,
effective.
and
Yeah.
feels very Savini-like.
Mm-hmm.
But Ed French,
Because we get a full shot of the
Yeah.
of the neck prosthesis
Yes.
and blood effects.
Yeah.
you get
Which
the
that is
whole
a very
shebang.
Savini-like thing.
And
It's
then-
like, I
and
want you to see all of it.
maybe even
Yeah.
more impressive, is the axe wound to the father's head.
Yeah,
When the axe wound is in there and the blood is just kind of gushing out from the sides.
yeah.
And the funny thing is that, they released the film and all of a sudden it says, Tom Savini, special effects makeup artist, and Ed French probably understandably is pissed about this.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Cleve Hall, who was the effects artist on all the kills in Florida, is pissed because he's reduced to special effects assistant, and he doesn't know why that's happening either, because obviously these days you would have just had multiple special
Yeah.
effects artists. But
Honestly,
he was...
now I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've ever seen a more of a controversial, like, who gets credit for what
Yeah.
under a slasher movie. You know what I mean? Like,
I
that's
think
pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
that's why I think there's a little bit of lying going on.
Oh, and I think
A little-
everybody was snowblind, if you know what I mean?
You know,
Sure,
also,
yeah.
in Hollywood, this isn't a Hollywood movie, but in the Hollywood system, like how your name appears in the credits, especially with actors, I mean, this one before this one has an and, this one's capitalized. All that stuff is hardcore, and
Yeah.
it's
Right.
very legal and litigious. Like,
Yes.
so if they don't get all that stuff like down to the letter, like right, like it could
Yeah.
be bad.
And we know this because there was, like, what, a 40-year battle between the Friday the 13th rights alone? I mean, like, it's like, who really wrote it? It's like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
had the name Jason,
So,
you know?
so unfortunately, you have, on one hand, you have the producers who have this thing they need to sell,
Yeah.
Right.
and you have a time when maybe no one will notice,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
to their chagrin or their delight, but also fear, it like hits, and they're like, oh
Yeah.
shit, well, everybody's actually seeing it, and everybody's actually like making a stink about it. And so the movie now is kind of like stained a little bit by that whole debacle, and it's just more like a
It's a really...
something to talk about with the guys at the horror convention.
Yeah.
I also,
But like
something else I
interesting.
caught, because, there's not a lot of information on, like, IMDb or even like whatever you go to search on this movie, you get to like find like interviews and stuff like that. But one thing I saw that I don't know if it's true, but I like to think it is that they said that the first editor on this was Joel Cohen, and he got fired from it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Because he did work on. I mean, he did
Yeah,
work
he
he worked on the original Evil Dead as well. And I'm not saying that like this is 100% true, but like when you look at the information, it's come up a couple times.
That's cool.
They've script doctored stuff.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
But can you imagine that, like a young Joel Cohen?
I could
like,
see that.
Like nerdy glasses.
I could
cutting
see
the film.
that,
They're
man.
Like, hey kid, you're out of here. You're never gonna make it in this business.
Well, there were 2 editors listed in the credits, but yeah, I mean, the producers had. I mean, this was really a movie, and there are so many, but this is really a movie where the producers took the print at the end and they were like, okay, we're gonna turn this into what we want.
Yep.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Yep.
some of it maybe to the detriment,
Betterment,
but some of it maybe to the positive because, for instance, those subliminal shots where like the decapitated head comes in.
That's my favorite
and
stuff.
that's all stuff that was put in by them.
That's a good choice.
That I thought really created a really eerie effect.
Yeah.
You know.
Honestly, like, that stuff really hit hard for me. I love that stuff because it's all about his mind too. It's his POV of everything. So it's like having that little extra creepiness.
And there's a scene of him chopping the door down with the pickaxe.
Yeah, shot like not shot similar to The Shining, but more the shot in The Shining with the freezer door where they're looking up.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it was a shot before The Shining, and I really like that low angle of him as he's chopping
really
up that door. Yeah. It's really cool.
And he's doing it with that Andy Dufresne rock hammer from Shawshank Redemption. It's a cool weapon.
That hammer is a weird weapon. Yeah,
especially when it gets her in the back a couple times, and that effect is real. And the babysitter's just standing up for it, waiting, just like getting it.
Yeah.
And then she's on the ground. You love that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Don't miss your cue. Yeah.
Perfectly lit in this dark room.
But that's
I love that shit.
Every good gag. Sometimes you have to like don't move an inch.
Yeah, especially when you're doing things in pickups, you're not gonna get the lighting right. They don't have access to their dailies.
That's
they
one
can't.
thing
They're
I
just like
definitely
flying
noticed.
blind on that stuff.
Yeah.
With some of those throat slits, you could tell they were picked up because like the lighting is so different and all
certain
that.
locations don't allow blood. Whatever the deal is.
Sure.
You got to do it later.
And we've all done it like a million times.
But you know what's really effective is not CJ, but George as a kid's kill. I know we talked about the decapitation and the head, but like the vibe, the shooting it in high speed,
right?
The music, just all elements combined, and having already basically seen it in montage throughout the whole film, and then a front row seat at the end of the movie to watch it from beginning to end is still like exciting and like you're watching this kid like experience that rite of passage we talked about where you see your parents naked, or we don't even know if that's his mother, but it's so weird, and the kid is so young and doesn't understand it. He just has to make it stop, almost like it's an alarm clock.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He runs down, he goes, he gets a weapon, and he comes back, and he really swings it blindly almost and takes her head off completely, with brute force. And then like the dad starts making noise and starts screaming, "You don't understand," and all this stuff. And it's the alarm clock in his mind still going off, and he has to end that too. And that's when he becomes a killer in his mind. And he's just, this trauma is like, has taken a turn. Like he didn't just like, kill the person he thought was torturing his dad.
Right.
So the movie has this special place with him becoming psychopathic.
Yeah, and the vibe of all that,
so dark.
That's where I really feel the director's Italian lineage coming in. Because it's very deep red.
Oh yeah.
It's very Pieces almost.
Yeah.
Where you have this
But less funny. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
well,
funny piece.
that's a funny,
Yeah.
but this isn't that funny, right?
No, this
But-
is not a funny movie.
No,
No.
yeah.
No.
But that whole like kind of little bits and pieces of a child's trauma,
Yeah.
and then kind of going to the full kill, and that kill feels very Argento to me.
Yeah.
But it's a fucking great scene.
But it's all American, baby.
Yeah.
It's like
All American.
By the
Florida
way-
and New York.
Hell yeah.
By the way, this is my first time seeing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
This is one of the few times where there's like a first time watch. Oh, Opossum, I think, also was a first time watch.
It's our first triple X title too, because it was rated triple X.
Yeah, video
and
nasty.
Well,
when it
to
came out.
that point, it being a video nasty, so a gentleman in the UK who either, I don't want to butcher this, but he either sold the film on VHS or rented it out of his store or distributed it. One of those in the UK was imprisoned for 6 months for selling this film.
Oh shit.
And it's the one big story of somebody actually going to prison for a video nasty that I personally know of. I'm
Yeah,
sure there are
okay.
It's
others.
like the cornerstone story.
But I
Jesus.
did hear that when the producers and director heard about that, they just thought it was absolutely hilarious.
It's fucked
But
up.
the only thing I can think of is that they were like, that's the ultimate promo
That's
right
the
there.
best
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean. They're a little bit slimy back in the
Oh,
back in
man.
the day,
Oh,
trying to
dude.
just get the movie.
Oh, they're just trying to make their money back and then
Oh, yeah.
some.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
and
think
they made a lot of money.
Oh,
on this
yeah.
movie. You know,
Oh, they had
made
to
a
have.
lot of money.
They had to have, yeah.
But
Yeah.
whatever.
I mean, the fact that y'all said that it was on a like 100+ screens in New York City, like that surprised me. I thought this movie just went straight to.
Well, when you think about what was playing in New York City at
yeah,
that time,
Caligula was
Yeah.
was on the fucking main screen in
Yeah,
the shot.
Street Fighter.
I mean, they probably showed porn like all the time there.
Caligula was
yeah.
half
And-
porn.
yeah.
Yeah. No, true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie is an example of like, like people want to, people talk about being slasher fans and they want to make a slasher movie and they're going to make the most evil slasher movie ever. And there are other movies that people say are scary slashers and
Well, they always go to
And-
gore first.
or
They're always like,
gore,
I gotta make those
or they go
gore-
through the
yeah.
regular tropes or whatever
Like
it may
cart
be.
before the horse almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is the level. Like, I don't know if this can be recreated, but I would be so proud if I had, to make something with this kind of power. I feel
Absolutely.
like,
Because really, horror as a genre is taken from the feeling. Like, horror is a feeling.
Yes.
Like the experience of horror is like a horrifying feeling. That is secondary to trauma. Like, horror comes after trauma. Trauma is the real scary shit. And so, like, you putting this in the horror sections, like cart before the horse, like there should really be a trauma section because like the trauma films that go deeper into horror,
Yeah.
that go one step further, are the ones that are always gonna like stand shoulders above all the other horror films.
Yeah.
Because without the trauma, without that stuff, they're not very deep. They're more surface level, and they become just like gore and murder porn and stuff.
Yeah.
And so having this kind of deeper context, even though a lot of people will probably write this movie off, not really digging into it because it's, of a time, for whatever reason, I mean, you can take what you're going to into this movie and get what you want out of it. But this movie has a lot to offer if you give it a chance. And this movie is very deep for being a
Yeah.
dramatic piece of art.
It's funny too, because like with a title like Nightmare, you're just like, okay, Nightmare, great, awesome.
Right.
But it's not that at all. It's something.
It's the
much-
nightmare of a damaged brain.
Yeah.
It's
or
exactly-
Dark. What was the original title?
What was it? Yeah.
Dark Games. And
Dark
I think,
Games.
and I think when you think about the way the script might have been originally structured with the kid,
Yeah.
that maybe that title
Yeah.
would
Totally.
make more
The
sense.
prankster, the cry wolf,
Yeah.
wolf aspect.
But in this version that we all have, I think Nightmare in a Damaged Brain might be not only one of the coolest titles
Yeah,
ever,
It's good.
but a perfect title for this one, though, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.